Mr.TeenScreams. It was June 1989, and the air was filled with the scent of pine and freshly cut grass. A group of wide-eyed teenagers had arrived at Camp Pine Ridge, eagerly anticipating a summer of new friendships, adventure, and endless fun. Little did they know, their journey would be nothing short of unforgettable. Among the newcomers was Jessica, a shy 16-year-old girl who had convinced herself to step out of her comfort zone and embrace the world. She waved goodbye to her parents and dragged her luggage to Cabin 5, a rustic wooden structure that seemed to have stood the test of time. As Jessica settled into her bunk, she couldn't help but overhear a hushed conversation between two counselors. They were speaking of the camp's dark history, whispering about a series of unsolved murders that had taken place there 25 years ago. Intrigued, Jessica listened closely, trying to catch every detail. The sun began to set, casting an eerie red glow over the camp. The campers gathered around a roaring bonfire, eagerly sharing stories, singing songs, and roasting marshmallows. The night was filled with laughter and excitement, yet Jessica couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in her gut. As the fire died down, one of the counselors, Mark, began to recount the tale of the unsolved murders. He spoke of a sinister figure who had once been a camper at Pine Ridge, returning years later to seek revenge on those who had wronged him. Mark warned that the mysterious killer was never found, and some believe his spirit still haunted the grounds. The campers were left with goosebumps, exchanging nervous glances and wondering whether the story was true or merely a tall tale. A week passed, and the campers had grown accustomed to their new surroundings. They spent their days swimming, hiking, and enjoying various activities. Jessica had made friends with a small group of kids, including the adventurous Sam, the sweet and caring Emily, and the bold and fearless Alex. One afternoon, while exploring the dense woods surrounding the camp, they stumbled upon a dilapidated cabin hidden behind the thick foliage. The sight of it sent shivers down Jessica's spine. Curiosity piqued. The group decided to investigate inside. Inside, they found dusty old newspaper clippings and photographs documenting the gruesome murders from 25 years ago. The once lively cabin had become a chilling shrine to the unspeakable horrors of the past. Unable to forget what they discovered, Jessica and her friends began to delve deeper into the camp's history. They found that Mark, the counselor who had told them of the story, had a personal connection to the case. His older brother had been one of the victims. As they pieced together the puzzle, they began to suspect that the killer might still be alive, and perhaps even among them. Fearfully, they decided to confront Mark, hoping that he would provide answers to the countless questions that plagued their minds. When they found Mark, he seemed uneasy, but agreed to talk. He revealed that he had come to Camp Pine Ridge in search of closure, hoping to uncover the truth about his brother's murder. He too believed that the killer was still out there. Together, they hatched a plan to expose the murder and bring justice to the victims. They left a trail of clues, luring the suspect to the abandoned cabin, where they would confront him once and for all. The night was dark and stormy as they waited in the shadows. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness. Cautiously approaching the cabin, the campers and Mark held their breath. Gripping makeshift weapons tightly in their hands, the figure stepped into the dim light, revealing himself as the camp's head counselor, Mr. Thompson. They had never suspected him, and the shock on their faces was evident. Mark demanded the truth, and Mr. Thompson realized he was cornered, confessed he had been a camper at Pine Ridge all those years ago, and he had witnessed the bullying that had driven the original killer to seek revenge. Unable to bear the guilt, he had taken it upon himself to continue the cycle of violence. He had returned to the camp year after year, searching for redemption in the blood of those he deemed deserving. As Mr. Thompson finished his confession, the sound of sirens pierced the air. The group had secretly informed authorities of their plan, and the police arrived just in time to apprehend the head counselor. The summer of 1989 would never be forgotten by the campers of Pine Ridge. As they returned to their normal lives, they carried with them the weight of their harrowing experience. In the years that followed, Jessica, Sam, Emily, and Alex remained close friends, bound by the secrets they shared and the truth they had uncovered. The once shy and introverted Jessica had grown up into a strong and confident young woman, no longer afraid to face the unknown. The legacy of Camp Pine Ridge lived on, but the darkness that had once haunted its grounds was finally laid to rest, replaced by the hope of brighter days ahead. It was a dark, chilly night in October when four friends, Jake, Emily, Ben, and Sarah, decided to go on a camping trip in the woods. The group had been planning the trip for weeks, and they were excited to escape the hustle and bustle of the city life for a few days. The woods they were visiting were known for their eerie ambience and mysterious folklore. The locals warned the group about the strange occurrences that took place in the woods, but the group dismissed the warnings, thinking they were just urban legends. As they set up their campsite, the group could hear the howls of wolves echoing through the woods. They tried to ignore the sounds, thinking it was normal in such a remote area. They had brought enough food and drinks to last them the entire trip, and they were looking forward to exploring the woods the following day. That night, as they sat around the campfire, they heard strange rustling sounds coming from the woods. They assumed it was just an animal and dismissed it, but the rustling continued. Suddenly, a loud shriek filled the air, sending shivers down their spines. The group jumped up, startled, and quickly extinguished the fire. They huddled together in their tent, hoping the noise would go away, but the shrieking persisted, and it seemed to be getting closer. Jake, the bravest of the group, decided to go outside and investigate. Armed with a flashlight, he ventured into the woods. After a few minutes, he came across an old cabin hidden behind the trees. The cabin seemed abandoned, and Jake assumed that the shrieks must be coming from inside. He cautiously made his way inside the cabin, trying not to make any noise. The cabin was in disarray, and the furniture was overturned. As he made his way deeper into the cabin, he found himself in a dimly lit room. In the center of the room was a large, grotesque statue of a wolf. Jake felt a shiver run down his spine as he realized the statue seemed to be watching him. Suddenly, the statue began to move, and Jake stumbled back in terror. The statue transformed into a real, ferocious wolf with glowing eyes and sharp teeth. Jake tried to run, but the wolf was too fast. It chased him through the woods, snarling and snapping at his heels. Jake could hear his friends calling out for him in the distance, but he was too terrified to respond. Eventually, the wolf cornered him near a river. Jake tried to fight back, but the wolf was too strong. It pinned him to the ground, ready to deliver the final blow. Suddenly, a loud gunshot echoed through the woods, and the wolf fell to the ground, lifeless. Sarah and Emily had followed Jake into the woods and had brought a rifle with them. As they helped Jake get to his feet, they noticed that his face was pale, and he was trembling with fear. He told them about the cabin and the wolf that chased him. The group realized that they had underestimated the warnings of the locals and that they were in grave danger. They quickly packed up their belongings and made their way back to the city, vowing never to return to the woods again. But the memory of that night would haunt them for years to come. Years later, Sarah returned to the woods with her family for a camping trip. As they sat around the campfire, she told her husband and children about the terrifying experience she had with her friends. Suddenly, they heard a rustling sound coming from the woods, just like the night when Sarah and her friends were chased by the wolf. Sarah tried to dismiss it, thinking it was just an animal, but the rustling continued. As they sat in silence, the rustling sounds grew louder and closer. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness of the woods. The family gasped in fear. It was a man dressed in ragged clothes and carrying a large hunting knife. He approached the family with a menacing look in his eyes. Sarah recognized him immediately as the man who had warned her and her friends about the dangers of the woods years ago. The man began to speak in a low, guttural voice, warning the family about the evil spirits that inhabited the woods. He told them the spirits would take revenge on anyone who dared to enter the domain. The family tried to back away, but the man continued to approach them, brandishing his knife. Suddenly, they heard a loud growl sound, and the man turned to face the woods. Out of the darkness emerged a pack of wolves, snarling and baring their teeth. The man backed away in fear, but the wolves surrounded him, growling and snapping at his heels. The family watched in horror as the man was attacked by the wolves. They could hear his screams echoing through the woods as he was torn apart by the savage beasts. Finally, the wolves disappeared back into the woods, leaving the family in silence. They packed up their belongings and ran back to their car, vowing never to return to the woods again. As they drove away, Sarah couldn't help but think that the man had been right about the dangers of the woods. The spirits that inhabited the woods were real, and they were not to be taken lightly. From that day on, Sarah never spoke of the incident again, but the memory of that night stayed with her for the rest of her life. She knew that the woods were a place of darkness and evil, and that those who dared to enter would do so at their own peril.